I have something special for you this week. I had the opportunity to be on the Uncommon Career podcast with Patricia Ortega, and she was gracious enough to allow me to share this interview with you today. Now, let me get out of the way so you can get what you came for. The job market is not dead, but the job boards are. Your brand has a compounding effect. Your ability to have confidence in communicating your brand has a compounding effect. You will start to attract the energy, the people, the industry, the company, whatever that might be, to you for today and into the future. And to me, that's worth investing in yourself. Just because it's shifted a little bit, the pendulum has shifted a little bit, doesn't mean you have to go with it. And frankly, I believe this is the best time to separate yourself.
Let's get started on the conversation on why LinkedIn, resume, and your communication skills are going to be incredibly important. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you here today. I am here with Jamila. And if you remember, Jamila was in one of the prior episodes. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that in the description. But today we are going to give you a little bit of kick in the pants because you kind of need it if you're in the job search and all you're doing is applying online. So before we get started, I do want you to know that on March 11th to the 13th, that's just in a couple of days, we are going to be having an event where we are going to solve all the problems that we're going to talk about today. So grab the link in the description. And for now, let's get started on the conversation on why LinkedIn, resume, and your communication skills are going to be incredibly important. Jamila, first of all, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Patricia. I feel so blessed to be on your podcast a second time. And I don't take for granted you sharing your audience and allowing me to talk to them today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you and I have been having conversations, right, about, why it's so important and why the traditional job search is all but dead right now. So where do you want to kick us off? Why is this such it's a pivotal issue right now in 2025?
Well, I think the first thing is that everyone is kind of hearing this same narrative, whether it's media, businesses, their friends, whomever, that we're in an employer market, meaning the employers have the advantage, whether that's because of layoffs, whether that's because of inflation, whatever economic thing, tariffs, whatever you want to scream about right now. It's no doubt, and I've talked to so many coaches, including yourself, that the job market is very different. And I would probably agree at this point that it is an employer's market, but I don't think that it's dead for employees, that we just have to take any and everything that comes our way. So I think that's part of what people are hearing, the narratives and the storylines. And it frankly is causing people to want to settle, which I'm encouraging my clients. I know you're encouraging your clients that just because it's shifted a little bit, the pendulum has shifted a little bit, doesn't mean you have to go with it. And frankly, I believe this is the best time to separate yourself.
Absolutely. When everyone is saying that the sky is falling, this is where you get on the wave, you ride the wave, and you'll realize a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line that this was actually an opportunity in disguise. And you mentioned, Jamila, that, the job search is not dead, right? And, part of my conversation was like, the job search isn't dead. The job boards, they're flailing. They're not doing great, right? But then all the more reason to position yourself. Right now, you mentioned this narrative, and it's so true. This narrative is not only frustrating everyone because you experience it when you're applying in the online job boards, but at the same time, you have this opportunity. And you have this opportunity to decide, am I a commodity where I'm going to be told where I'm at? Or am I more on the premium side, right? When you buy a pair of pants, you're either going to buy the cheapest one because it's least expensive and it takes the least amount of work, or you're going to head over to maybe Levi or another awesome brand, right? And decide that you're going to go for quality over quantity. And that takes more time, but ultimately you are going to get what you pay for, whether it's in time or an investment.
That's so good, Patricia. And I promise you, audience, we talked about a lot before, but we didn't talk about this part, right? We did not talk about this part. And that's a lot of what I wanted to share with your audience today. I call it the commodity trap. So I also am an investor and I'm a trader and I understand commodities to a degree.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily trade them or invest in them, but I understand them as a part of the greater part of investing. And what I find people are doing, they're undervaluing themselves and treating themselves like a commodity, right? And when you treat yourself like a commodity, or if you were on the open market from an investing standpoint, like whether that's corn, steel, gold, whatever that commodity is, that means the only value you have is price. And
Mhm.
if we're in an employer market, that means they control the price, right? And so
That
how do
doesn't
you
sound like a winning combination.
Man, not today. You can't be a commodity. You have to have something else. You have to have a unique value proposition. You have to be able to differentiate yourself, or you're just going to be like corn on the open market, or you're going to be like oil on the open market, where it literally is does everybody does the same thing, everybody looks the same, and the
Yeah.
employer in this season gets to negotiate the price because they're controlling the supply and demand in this scenario. And I know that's more of an economic approach to it, but I believe that's exactly how you have to look at it from an economic standpoint. Right now, they don't necessarily need you. I don't necessarily think you need
Yeah.
them as much either, but they don't need you as badly as they did in 2021 and 2022.
Oh,
So don't
absolutely.
allow that price to be set by them because you're operating like a commodity. You want to
Yeah.
differentiate yourself by like crafting that unique value proposition and then being able to communicate it in a way that differentiates you, because that is what's going to set those individuals apart that are going to grow their income, grow their salary, grow their career trajectory by 20, 30, 40, 100% over the next 2 to 3 years, like you mentioned.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. One of the things that you're talking about right now is you said, a commodity is what's available everywhere. And that is honestly what is happening when you are one of two, three, four, 500 resumes, which by the way, half of those resumes are submitted by bots. The other
Right.
half are written by AI. And the thing that's interesting is that as AI becomes more and more a part of the career search, like with everything else, it is raising the standard to how you're supposed to provide your brand. And so sometimes we used to think, oh, I'll just DIY my resume. And I applaud you
Hmm.
for the attempt at DIYing your resume. But can I tell you, I have seen DIY resumes over and over again. And I'm at the point where I realize even sometimes I see, resumes that are professionally written. And I'm going to be super, super honest here. Even with resumes that are professionally written, if you don't know your value, you can't give
Right.
that input for that resume to truly shine. And so, for multiple reasons, you need that branding expertise to be able to pull out of you those gold nuggets, those pieces that it's really equity that you've had over time that you've built up, but you're not actually cashing it in. So for me, that's the really important piece is that you may see yourself as premium or as luxury because you know the value you bring, but you have to be able to articulate it and communicate it. And in that is going to be where you cash in on it.
Yeah, I don't think any of us do a very good job, meaning human beings, of being able to
Yeah.
say right off the bat without any support or help or someone else objectively looking at the situation to say, this is what I bring to the table. I
Mm.
don't think we do a good job of that. However, when the right person asks the right questions that then get me to talking about what I do and what I bring to the table, that person can subjectively hear things that and objectively hear things that I can't hear or even put together in a cohesive brand statement. And you mentioned that so carefully that I think if if we don't put some extra hot sauce on that particular thing for people to understand, it's why your resume will look like everyone else is in the applicant pool. It'll look like everyone else's that they went and grabbed, like we talked about pre-show, the keywords. Everybody's got the same keywords. I think we're past that phase, if I'm honest. Now it's
Hmm.
what do you bring to the table that makes me want to hire you right now versus the other person? And I frankly don't think we do a good job as human beings. Like even myself personally, with my brand as a career strategist, I don't do that well for myself. And so having someone else help me to craft that is vital. And I think that sometimes we miss that as human beings, is that this is a very introspective, but because you're in it all the time, it's very tough to pull out the things that you need to pull out that's now going to translate and connect with the person that you're interviewing with or that's looking at your resume.
Oh goodness, you're so right on that. Even when you called yourself out, I was like, "Oh, busted." Like same thing. There's no way that I can get a true 360 sense of clarity because I can't see behind my ear. Like
Yeah.
I can't see, you know what I mean? There's certain places you just can't see. And having someone else be able to, there's a concept, it's called Johari's window, where you're able to see, what other people see. And
Hmm.
only by them sharing what they see can you then put the puzzle pieces together and see another perspective that's a completely different thing you didn't realize. And that's one of the pieces where, I'm going to tell you one perspective that is missed like 97 out of 100 times. I literally do LinkedIn reviews like all the time. And out of 100, I literally counted only 3 people had a well developed LinkedIn account.
Ooh, so
And
3%,
a link 3%, only 3 people had a LinkedIn account that if I were a hiring manager, I would say, dang, this person is sharp. Everyone
they would
else had
evoke that
either the
reaction. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. You want this like sense of emotion. This is why LinkedIn is such a great opportunity. It's got the visual. You've even got an opportunity to share a tiny 10 seconds worth of audio with your pronunciation. Like there's so many ways to see other layers of you and I don't think people are capitalizing on it. And so as a result, when a manager could, they're when they get to your profile, they're already at least a little bit invested. They clicked on your profile or they looked at your resume and literally, went on and logged onto LinkedIn and said, what can I learn about this person? So if you see that a hiring leader viewed your LinkedIn profile, you know somebody was interested in what you had to offer. And at that point, you get on your profile and you see that default image. I
Oof.
know I've said it in the last couple episodes, but I'm trying to get this across. If you have that LinkedIn image,
Oh my
it is going
goodness.
to communicate either I'm not on LinkedIn, I don't care, or I'm just not as serious about my career. And I know that for you, it's probably not any of those things. You're probably an amazing professional, but LinkedIn is just not a top priority. And that's fine. You don't have to have LinkedIn as your top priority in order to be a fantastic professional. But in today's market, you have to look at what game you're playing and then you have to play that game to win.
That's it. I call that the hidden cost of professional invisibility.
Mm,
That's the hidden
that's good.
cost of you actually being invisible, right? So when you have that default banner or you are not smiling on your profile picture, I joke internally, and I'll share this with everyone. When I see someone not smiling, the first thing I say is, "Oh, well, man, it actually looks like you might have dead bodies in your freezer because it's not
Stop it.
engaging, right? Right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if
That's
I'm
so
going
funny.
through a profile and I've never met you, I've never seen video content from you like, someone might see. I've never like engaged with you real time in person. I'm not talking about Zoom. And that's the profile picture I see and you're not smiling genuinely. Do you have dead bodies at this point? Because that's not it.
Yeah.
That's not it.
You do
So
have to be careful.
that's not what you wanna show, and now you're invisible. You're invisible. That's the hidden cost of being invisible. To your point, Patricia, around you could be an incredible professional. Executives that I've worked with, I've had to help them through the smiling. Like, sometimes
Yeah.
the bulk of my coaching on the front end comes around, "I know this is not how you traditionally like to take pictures, and there's probably some insecurities or some things that you got to work through. But I promise you, when you take the picture, you're going to do a selfie, you're going to do a bunch of them. I'll edit it for you. We're going to put it on a great background. I promise you, you're going to love it. You're going to fall in love with it. But that's sometimes a hurdle too. But if you don't
Yeah.
have that engaging professional profile photo and that incredible headline that's not the auto generated default LinkedIn banner, your profile is invisible and that's costing you valuable money. I can't talk to you
Yeah.
about negotiating if you're invisible from a brand standpoint. We can't talk about negotiation until we get you visible because you're already giving away
Yeah.
anything we would negotiate by having an invisible brand.
Oh, goodness. And you talked about the bottleneck, right? Like we can't talk about negotiations because your bottleneck is still at the front of the pipeline, right? And here's the thing that I hear so often because I do work with folks in, doing the LinkedIn reviews on a daily basis. You and I have been talking about that. Is that I often hear, I don't know what's wrong with my resume. I keep applying and applying and I don't hear anything. And I'm like, what if it's not your resume? What if they see your resume and then they realize, oh, this is interesting. Let me go on their LinkedIn and see. And they thought it was interesting, but then they show up to your LinkedIn and your about section has, let me be honest, flowery language. If you have the word passionate, that's another example. I know I've been harping on that too. Lately, I've been talking a lot about LinkedIn, Jamila. So it's
Yes.
just helping people to kind of like turn the ship on the fact that LinkedIn has more dimension to it. It has more personalization to it. It has another layer because you have visuals where you can't have visuals on your resume. And yes, there's arguments on both sides, right? Like you shouldn't have a picture because of this or that or whatever. But the reality is that this is just the world we live in. And so we need to figure out how do I leverage this for my, to take advantage of it instead of to be hindered by it, right? And I'm going to tell you one more thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned this is a cost of invisibility. And I think in addition to that, there's a cost of not being visible, but then there's a cost of being visible and having your picture or having your banner or something on your profile give the opposite, right? So not
Get you
only were
attention.
you were visible, But now there's a different impression out there, right? And so being savvy about, what impression you give out is super important.
Yeah, the narrative is being broadcast. It's being streamed. It's whether or not you're wanting to control it or not. But it's absolutely there. They're forming opinions. And I like to go through a little competitor analysis with my clients. Let's treat your brand like a business. So let's go
Mm-hmm.
look at people with your exact same job title and, fairly decently similar experience and see what their
Mm-hmm.
profiles look like. Let's see how you measure up because that's what absolutely what the recruiter is going to do, the hiring manager is going to do. They're going to take their couple of candidates and they're trying to get intel. They're doing recon work to help them make a great decision. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're not competing and they feel more engaged, you've already set the tone, even if you haven't done your first interview yet. You've already set the tone for what's about to happen next. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to be that person. Well, dang, ugh, that banner or that profile or that about section or the experiences isn't matching your resume. There's some
Mm-hmm.
disconnect. There's just so many things as you continue to go down your profile. You know what? Let's just go with the other candidate. I feel great. And
I have
let's
no
move on.
questions.
I have no questions. That's such a good way to
Right.
put it. I have no questions. I'm going to use that. You mind if I borrow that? Because that's
Oh, you're
literally
welcome to it.
that's literally what they're thinking. I want to feel as comfortable as possible. And I always try to tell my clients to position themselves as a hiring manager. Who would you want to work with? And
Mm-hmm.
why would you want to work with that person? And remember that that hiring manager is trying to keep their job so that they can actually continue their lifestyle for them and their family. So I need to get the
Oh,
deck stacked on this next hire, or it could cost me my job. So, what can you do to help make that easier for them? So that they're not thinking about the fact that you're going to be a quick turnover or you're not going to be qualified or you're not going to be able to get the job done or you're not going to take weight off of their shoulder. Be the problem, the solution to that problem for them so that they're not thinking about that when they look at your resume, your LinkedIn profile and you get to the interview process. That's not even a thought in their mind. They know you're it and if anything you're going to help them get promoted.
oh, absolutely. You talked about questions. Like we kind of both have this idea of like answering their questions, right? One of the biggest things that you can do on a resume and on your LinkedIn, on your overall brand, right? Even in your networking conversations is, do you remember, were you ever a server, Jamila?
No, I
Waiter,
never
waitress?
worked in the restaurant industry. All retail for
Well,
me.
see, I was in the restaurant industry, right? And I remember being a server, waitress, whatever you want to call it. But I remember what they drilled into my head is nobody better ask you for anything. You need
Mm.
to anticipate what they're going to need and you need to take it to them. And that's how you provide like a delightful experience for your customers. And I remember always trying to get into their head and saying, okay, if they have fries, they're going to want some ketchup. If they've got steak, they may want some A1. I don't know if they do or don't, but I'm going to take it to them. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's figuring out like, what about your brand? And this is the part that gets really interesting because sometimes I start talking to folks about what are the red flags? What are things that you maybe are a little concerned about? Right. And whatever that is, there's a way to navigate that in the resume, in the LinkedIn. And at the end of it, they should have all their questions should be answered,
Right.
right? And one of the things I was telling you, I'll have my clients meet with the recruiter to specifically say, tell me all the questions that come up when you look at my resume, right? We'll develop
Right.
their brand. And then it's like, tell me everything that comes up. And you'd be surprised at such small things that you wouldn't think, right? And they
Mhm.
come up. But now it's like, okay, we want to anticipate and answer that question because the more friction there is, the more likely they're going to turn around and go with someone else.
Yeah. It's like how do you get inside of their brain to where they're just like, "Oh, I got to talk to Jamila. I got to talk to Patricia." That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I'm focused on. What do we have to do to speed this up? And I've been in that position where I probably, oh gosh, I probably need to sit down and count this up, but thousands, probably more than thousands of people in the tens, 20,000 range, probably somewhere in there. I've been responsible for hiring over my career. And
Mm,
whenever I found myself saying to the HR team, what do we have to do to speed this process up? Like to get them through the hiring process, not, I don't want to skip steps legally, but what can I do? They knew what I meant. Like, let's get
yeah.
this going so we can bring this person on board. I knew that I didn't have any questions. I felt super confident that I want to
Mm,
accelerate this, get them on board, get them in place so that they can start doing the stuff that I know they can do. So that's the
Yeah.
position you want the hiring manager in, is that they're just like, how do we get you through this process as quickly as possible? It's also a trick that I learned
Mhm.
from a coach back in the day who mentored me, is when you can get them saying things like that to you, you know you got it. Like, so if you ever want
Yes.
to
Yeah.
figure out, like in the middle of an interview, when they start saying, well, we're going to try and push, or we're going to try and accelerate, or we want to get you to the next step, that type of language, aggressive,
That's how you
that's
know.
how you
You
know.
got them.
You got them.
You
You got
got 'em.
them. Check.
I remember I was making a turn from education. I ended up, working for someone else in a completely different field. It was more of like the technical side of things, and I didn't come out of the technical side, but mid-pandemic, I had done all of the shifting into from all in person to all online, right? Can I tell you, I have never had this happen until he mentioned it. But I redid my resume, and obviously, when you do this, it's easier, right? When
Mhm.
you do this over and over and over again, this is all you do all day long. Is all I do all day long. It's like,
Right.
redevelop these brands, right? And so I redeveloped it, and I don't think I like truly clicked for me, even as a career coach. Like I knew it, but when this person, his name was Shane, when I went to the interview, and Shane's like, right, first several minutes, he was like, why do I feel like you were made just for us? He's like, I don't understand it. He's like, you didn't have this role, but why do I feel like it's just for, like, we need you? And I just remember thinking, the system works. The system
Right.
works. Like
Right.
targeting works.
Yes. It's the secret sauce, and to back up to what we were
It
talking
is.
about at the beginning of the podcast, that we're in a different market, but this,
Yeah,
just like prior to that we were in an employee market and it swung to the other side, it swings. That's part of it. It'll swing
absolutely.
back in the other direction. However, the skills that you develop in this season, especially if you're investing in yourself, right? Whether that's through the Career Transformation Lab or individual coaching, if you're investing in yourself in this season to
Hmm.
position yourself, that's where you can really accelerate your career, your compensation, and set yourself up not for the next, just the next move, but the move after that and the one after that, right?
Oh, yeah.
That to
Yeah.
me is
And,
so
and
key.
being able, you mentioned like, not only having more opportunities, but what comes to mind, is I'm sure you've had this experience too. I'd love to hear your story as well. But I've had multiple clients now who we redeveloped their LinkedIn, we redeveloped their resume, but their LinkedIn is key. Okay. You'll see why in a second. So we redeveloped their LinkedIn, and they're like about to start the job search, and then they get headhunted, and they don't
Mm,
actually go into the job search, right? It doesn't happen every time, but
right.
to see it happen is like glorious. Literally just a couple weeks ago, I had one of we asked for wins on Fridays, like, what's your win, right? And they were like, I just finished my brand literally like 3 days ago, and I got recruited like now, right? And so it just gives you opportunities. What a different conversation that is when someone comes to you in the middle of a quote unquote down market, right? What a different conversation that is. And they were like, well, I'm not really sure if this is my ideal company. And I'm like, what's happening is the same thing that happens when you go to a company. They're like, I'm not really
Mhm.
sure, right? You're in a totally different position. I'm like, you need to go on that interview and experience what it's like to be sought after and to not have the
Yes.
pressure of having to perform, right? So, so, so
Oh,
important.
man.
And I think with that, Jamila, I'm going to kind of turn the tables on to
Yeah.
you because we're going to have a little bit of the chat on communication skills. And I
Yeah.
think this is the perfect place for it.
Yeah, I think what you said there is so key. I had a client, it wasn't a headhunter, and we're not even finished with the process yet. So we're probably maybe at the 60 to 75% of the LinkedIn rebrand. That's about where we are right
Yeah,
now, real time. And she had some executives that she used to work with reach out to her and say, what are you doing with your LinkedIn? Right.
that's amazing.
And she was just like, oh, um, yeah, I don't all the way know everything. I've got some help though. But they could feel it, if that makes sense. And these are people that she's worked
Mhm.
with for a while, and they could feel the brand shift, and they're loving it, and they're engaged with it. And again, I'm saying 60 to 75% of the way there is generous, because we're not done yet. But if that's the reaction with the tweaks that we've made from a brand standpoint, that's what you're gonna get with inbound versus you reaching out to people. That inbound headhunter slash recruiter hiring manager, that's a different feeling.
Mhm.
I don't know any other way because I have a sports background. So I was recruited to play basketball. And if you've ever been in that environment where someone's coming to you saying they want you to come play for them, it's like being high. You're never going to want to do it any other way. It's just not
Yeah.
even it's not even an option. My last few jobs that I worked in corporate America, same thing. They came and got me. I don't know another way. So when I'm coaching my clients, it's like we've got to get you in position to where they're coming for you. Because to your point,
Yes.
that interview, you walk into that interview very different than the one where you applied and that traditional process of going through the resume interview versus they reached out to you and said, I want to get you in front of so and so.
Mm.
That feels so different. And I want that for everybody. I really do.
100%, right? And whether it's in interviews, right? If we're talking more broader communications, whether it's in interviews or networking or an info gathering session or a screening, there are tactics and ways that you can strategize so that you bring the conversation to you. Even if you're the one who set up the phone call, there's things that you can say that immediately garner interest and things that you can do so that people will then ask you the next question. And even though you started the conversation, the tables turn and somehow now you're the one who's answering and responding to their interests. And so super interesting kind of the psychology behind it, the strategy behind it, the preparation. You don't just walk into those meetings cold, right? And so I know we've been talking about communication, but I just want to take a quick second
Yeah.
here to tell you about the transformation lab, right? We mentioned it at the
Yeah.
beginning of the episode. It'll happen in just a few days, March 11th, 12th, and 13th. This is not like, let me give you just a quick freebie, a little something. No, this is an actual full on workshop, right? It is a paid event because we are giving you literally the blueprint. So the link is in the description. We are going to be covering these three things. We're going to be covering resume and for overall branding, literally walking you step by step. I personally am going to be telling you step by step, not strategy, not idea, not theory. You are going to end up with a solid plan for your resume. And then we're also going to talk about LinkedIn and communication skills. So,
Yes.
Jamila, do you want to share anything about the Transformation Lab in particular?
Yeah, I think the part that you mentioned about it being actionable, that's part of our I don't it's probably an unofficial slogan, no fluff, all action, because that's where the rubber hits the road. We can talk theory and all the other stuff, but I want people to say, okay, if I had this statement on my resume, I can now shift it to
Hmm.
this statement and it converts better. Or if I did this with my about section, or if I did this with my experience, if I told my brand story in my headline this way, this converts better. It's very clear,
Hmm.
concise, and my communication now is going to also change automatically. Once I change my resume and I get the language and I change my LinkedIn, now my verbal communication, my written communication changes because I now have the language to speak. I have the language
Mm.
to speak because I managed $1 billion category for the one of the largest companies in the world that afforded me opportunities to be able to deliver on profit, loss, reduce shrink by 10%, and being able to take those same principles and apply them to your business. I know, not I think, but I know that we'll be able to
Mm.
save you at a minimum 2% on this same metric. Whatever that, I'm just making this stuff up off the top of my head.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
because the language changed on my resume with the rebrand that you're going to get in the Career Transformation Lab, as well as your LinkedIn, now you have some of that language that you're going to use. Now, you'll still need a little confidence to exude that, right? Some work on that confidence, but you'll have the language that you need to be able to communicate in your DMs on
Hmm.
LinkedIn, in the interview process, because you can have it on paper, you can have it digitally in your hand on your LinkedIn profile, but you're at some point you're going to have to be able to articulate that brand message to an audience, and we want you to be able to
Oh,
do that in a phenomenal way that again puts you in control of the conversation, to where now they're saying, okay, well, what do we have, and they're asking you questions. So then you do A, then you do B, and then okay, so now what are we, so when can we get together with you and bring you on a tour of our
on board.
facility or
Yep.
whatever that is? That's the next step. That's when you kind of know, when they start leaning in asking you those types of questions, that you're converting them, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it makes sense to me. If you're
Yeah.
listening, you're probably nodding along like, "Yep, I get you, Jamila. I get you." And that's the beautiful thing is that you're looking at resume, LinkedIn, and communication. So that way, the things you say in your resume match up to what you say in your interview.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what happens is you have this glorious resume and this great LinkedIn. They call you in for a screening and they're kind of like, what just happened? Clearly, this resume is professionally developed, but are we getting the person that's on paper? And that friction creates a lot of distrust, and it's really hard to come back from that. It is really hard to gain confidence for what could be $100, $200, $300,000 decision, right? And even more expensive if you go in there and 90 days in it doesn't work out, you're immediately on a, an improvement plan, or you immediately decide you want to go somewhere else, right? This is a very high stakes conversation, the interview. And so for that reason, you want to go in there ready to go with the communication skills that match the LinkedIn and the resume. And the confidence in that really comes from being able to, like you said, Jamila, right? You start with articulating your value. And first you have to articulate it. You can't own something that you can't articulate, right? So you first articulate it, and then you're like, okay, let me now, and this happens all the time. I would all the time. I'll meet with someone and they're like, well, I don't really have any skills. I'm not really
Right.
sure.
Every
Oh, but
time.
I didn't really, every time,
Every
right?
time.
We go through the process, they see it on paper. And I had someone that I gave them the resume back, right? The final draft. And they're like, yeah, I don't know if this is the final because I don't want to exaggerate. And I'm like, okay,
Why do they
highlight and tell me
hey,
what's wrong.
time out. Why do I don't understand? Again, it goes back to, as human beings, we don't do that well. So even once it's
We
right, I
don't.
had a client that I'm working with on the LinkedIn, just the headline statement. Yeah, I think I'm gonna change this word because I don't know if that's true. What do you mean you don't know if that's true? That's what you told me. It's true. This is what you do. But it's really tough to embody
Yeah.
that. And I think
It's
I
hard.
think that is such a great point, Patricia, that you have to you have to believe it, right? You have to really believe in it.
Yes.
Not we know you did it, right? And you know you did it, but you really have to believe in and wanna communicate it too. It sounds like the same
Yes.
thing, but it's not, because obviously we're experiencing the same thing with both of our clients in separate states, that they have this
Yes.
apprehension about embodying the work that they've done and the value that they can create, which is a
Yeah.
hurdle,
And
don't get me
when
wrong.
you're acting, when you're talking or drafting your resume, drafting your LinkedIn from that mindset, you are on the inside of a box with a lock on the outside. You cannot unlock that yourself.
Yeah.
That's what makes it really, really hard, is that when you already feel like, well, I don't want to say and I don't want to say, right? You need someone else on the outside who's going to be like, hold on. Like, you just told me, right?
Right.
To challenge and to say, like this with the resume. Here is the resume. Oh, it's not accurate. It's exaggerated. Awesome. Can you highlight for me everything that is not accurate? And when the paper comes back completely white with no highlights, that's how we know, okay, now you've got it. First it's articulation, but then it's actually reading it and owning it. The fact that you couldn't highlight tells me your confidence is literally going up right
As we're
now
talking, yep.
because you can see it. Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
so good. That's so good, but it is a hurdle. Whether it's in that headline statement is oftentimes when, I can tell
Yes.
there's like these butterflies, almost like anxiousness maybe that's happening. And then sometimes in the
Hmm.
about section on the LinkedIn profile, but in definitely on the resumes. Like, I don't know if this
Yeah.
is and that you're not alone. How about that? I would say that's
No.
a widespread opportunity for all of us. However,
It's like the dentist with the bad teeth. Even the career
ooh,
coach is like, "Oh, this is hard for me," right? You have to have someone else to help you and come
yes.
alongside you and see what you are maybe not willing to see in that moment. Maybe it's
Mhm.
hard to see it, but it's so helpful to have that person to give you that vote of confidence and say, like, "No, that is what you said, and that is true."
Right. And frankly, why wouldn't you want someone to have your back like that? That's the other thing that I think is so powerful in it. It's like based upon what you told me, client A, I'm telling you as coach A, this is what you said and this is how I heard you. And I think it's exceptional and I think you should talk about this more and in this way, right? And then you
Yeah.
start to believe that and communicate your value that way. Who doesn't want that?
That is life-giving. It's literally life-giving, and I believe and I know that you and I are on the same page on this, but I believe, like, we would put on this earth to give life,
Yes.
and to me, that is very much life-giving when someone turns around and says, "I didn't believe in myself in the way that I believe in myself now that I have, A, the words to articulate it, but B, someone else to come alongside and actually kind of nudge me a little bit and be like, 'No, that is you. Like, look in the
So
mirror.
good.
That is totally you, and you're looking pretty hot right now.'"
Right. Like, come on, like let's get out here and shop this thing out, right?
There you go.
I think that
There you
but
go.
and that's the importance of investing in yourself, right? And for me,
Yeah.
it's a function of when do you want to, like, as a priority, when do you want to solve the problem that you're having?
Mm,
Right? So you have this opportunity, this problem that's been presented, in your career, wherever you are in your career. But this it's a little bit more special right now because of the environment and the economy and the job market. So now you have
Yeah.
this priority of solving this issue in your career, making this career change, getting this job, whatever it may be. And you've got this competing external force at the same time. So now it comes
Mhm.
down to how quickly do you want to solve the problem? And I think
Mhm.
that's where investing in yourself, instead of sitting in the fact that I need this and the job market's bad, you could sit in that mess. It's a mess down there. Trust me. You
Mhm.
can sit in that for the next 2 years till we're out of it, and you will be in the exact same place that you were in when this
Yeah.
all started. Or you can invest in yourself, make the shift, right? Whether that's at the Career Transformation Lab, whether that's one on one with a coach, you can make that
Yeah.
shift and then solve the problem right now for yourself, not for just today, but this has a compounding effect because your
Oh, yeah.
brand has a compounding effect. Your ability to have confidence in communicating your brand has a compounding effect. You will start to attract the energy, the people, the industry, the company, whatever that might be, to you
Yeah.
for today and into the future. And to me, that's worth investing in yourself.
Absolutely. These are lifelong skills. These are lifelong skills that pay dividends. Even if you just earn that, new job with that increase now, that will pay dividends passively,
Yeah,
right? Because every job after this, you're going to be making more.
more.
But also because the skills that you learn when we talk about like networking, but not making it feel salesy
Yeah,
and sleazy, all the skills that you learn, you take with you. And so it's an amazing investment. It's an
yeah,
amazing
yeah.
investment. Okay, listen, Jamila, we could go on
Oh, we could do
and
this for
on
hours.
and on. But we do want to kind of be considerate of everyone's time. And so, tell me, what do you want to leave our friends with?
For me, I'm a servant leader by nature, and I don't want people to allow what's happening around them or in the economy or in the job market to be their story. So whatever we have to do to help you to not let this be your story, that's what I
Yeah,
want to do. That's what I want to support you in. You're not alone. There are people that have experience, expertise that are going to be at the Career Transformation Lab that can help you, that you will connect with, that can help you not allow what's happening around you, your external environment, dictate what happens to you as an individual. So that's what I want
mm,
people to take away. You're not alone. We can help you get through it and allow this to be an incredible story versus like the masses. This isn't good.
absolutely. Change the narrative for yourself. There's a narrative going around. Go against the current and change the narrative for yourself. Well, Jamila, it has been such a great time chatting with you. It always is a great time. And if you're listening, thank you so much for hanging out with us. This has been a great conversation. I can't wait to see you next week. And for now, check out the links in the description. You'll be able to connect with Jamila there. You'll also be able to sign up for the Transformation Lab. And as always, know that we're praying for you. We love you. We're cheering you on. We'll see you on the next one.